Hello!
I reviewed The Arrow and mainly just the first 3 or 4 seasons of it and how the gender roles in it are portrayed towards women being independent and strong.
Today I reviewed Robin Hood Dark Forest, which is a movie that puts a zombie twist on the traditional Robin Hood stories.
And today I'll review Super Robin Hood, which is a game that portrays Robin Hood as weak and not masculine. The unifying thesis that we have, combining all of these different sources and their different genres, is that when you put Robin Hood in a genre that's different from the traditional genre, that gives authors the freedom to also make the gender roles different from traditional gender roles. In all of our games we have characters define gender roles, and we'll go over that now.
But let's talk about zombies. Robin Hood Dark Forest opens up in the familiar setting of Sherwood Forest in medieval England, with Robin and his men fighting off the sheriff and his men, and in the process meeting Maid Marian. Together, they create a plan to rob the sheriff of Nottingham of his gold. But things don't quite go to plan. While Maid Marian is able to escape, Robin Hood, Will Scarlet, and Friar Tuck are all captured. Will and the friar are quickly executed, and Robin is able to escape, but is mortally wounded in the process. Inexplicably, a witch comes and saves Robin Hood, and promises to heal him on the condition that he sells his soul after 3 years. Robin Hood accepts, and the witch gives him a potion of the undead, allowing him to revive anyone who has been dead for less than 24 hours. Robin Hood returns to Nottingham and revives his friends, and they return happily to Sherwood Forest. However, when Robin tells Marian of this, she is not pleased. But before they can confront the witch, the sheriff's men come and kill everybody except Maid Marian and Little John, including Robin Hood. So they return to the witch, steal all her potions, and attempt to use the potion of the undead again, except they've been dead for over 24 hours, so they turn into mindless zombies. The remainder of the movie is spent as Marian and Little John fight off the zombies using their rare potions, eventually trapping them in the Sherwood Forest. Now, in analyzing how gender roles differ in this genre, one of the key characters that sticks out is Maid Marian. In traditional Robin Hood stories, she kind of fits the damsel in distress trope, where she has little value other than supporting Robin Hood and loving him. In this case, she has much more agency, as her literal introductory scene is her sword fighting with the sheriff's men. She also has a key role in plotting the robbery of the sheriff, and all this sets her up to be a more dynamic character that is more suited to be a protagonist in the latter half of the movie. Additionally, the role of Robin Hood is also somewhat diminished, as not only is he zombified halfway through, but he also loses much of his, I would say manliness, because he's unable to shoot a bow or arrow, and is less agile than he is in other versions. Now, in evaluating this movie, there are several key detractors, the first of which is the writing. The writers really fail to keep a main antagonist for Robin and Marian to fight against. For example, the plot lines with the sheriff, the witch, and the zombies all end quite unsatisfactorily, and it really just, despite there being zombies in the movie, it actually feels boring. Additionally, the acting is, to put it lightly, atrocious. I know that it's a low-budget film, but it really feels like they just took random people off the street and asked them to read some lines. Just listen to this. So overall, I cannot give this movie more than a 1 over 10. It is not even worth watching for the laughs.
So I'm talking about The Arrow, the TV show, which spans about 8 seasons and over 100 hours of film, which I did not watch all of it, but I've seen the first multiple seasons. And the key concept is of a rich billionaire's son who gets lost on an island after taking his big yacht on a trip. And he's stranded for 5 years, where in those 5 years he's abandoned from society, has no real contact with the outside world, and he learns how to fight. And in doing so, he gains a grudge against the rich in his society where he came from, and he found out from his dad that a lot of the rich people were corrupting his city. And so after the 5 years when he was stranded, he came back with a mission to save his city, and he took on the persona of the Arrow, where he had a green hood and you would use a bow and arrow matching the description of Robin Hood. And in doing so, he gets a lot of people on his team, and when he fights this crime and fighting against the rich, it matches a lot of the stories of Robin Hood with the community and teamwork of the team that he collects against the rich and money that is corrupting a lot of the poor people. Now, where gender roles comes in and really defies the typical Robin Hood gender roles is that women, especially in the later seasons of the show, are portrayed as extremely powerful and independent, with one of the main characters that is alongside the Arrow being a woman who is also stranded from the same yacht trip. And we can see from this that women aren't portrayed as weak or less powerful as men, as it's typically seen from Robin Hood stories in the past, but rather in this they are almost portrayed as stronger in some cases, and that's typically not seen. Now, on the other hand, the masculine part of Robin Hood or the Arrow is fairly consistent, as Oliver Queen, who is the Arrow or Robin Hood, is extremely masculine and typically doesn't like being seen as weak or defenseless. And this really creates contradiction between the films or gender roles, as on the side for masculinity, it follows in line with a lot of the Robin Hood themes, but for the feminine side, it really breaks into a different realm where at the time where it was filmed in modern times, 2007 to 2020-ish, a lot of the feminine and like the feminine movement was very strong during this time, and so that might have caused an impact in how they were portrayed. And overall, I'd say this TV show is definitely on the better side of ones I've seen, with the acting being incredibly good for all the fight scenes and choreography that is involved. And also the script that was used to make it was not only entertaining, but also had a deeper message laid in with it. So overall, I'd probably give it about a 7 to an 8. The only thing is that it's extremely long and hard to follow at some points.
The game I reviewed is known as Super Robin Hood. This game was made in 1978 by the Oliver twins, who were both 17 at the time, and they would code for 18 to 22 hours a day, taking breaks so that their computer could cool down. So it's a very ancient game, and you can tell that it's very ancient the second you start playing it. The pixel art is very pixely. A lot of the mechanics you come to expect in modern pixel platformers aren't found in this game, which leads to a very interesting experience. The premise of the game is that you're Robin Hood and you're stuck in a castle and you want to save Maid Marian and leave the castle. And while walking through the castle, there are a bunch of obstacles, there's some spikes, there's some little creatures, and then there are some knights that you have to shoot with your bow. I think some things that are different about this game compared to modern games are that there are a lot of delays. For example, if you want to shoot something, you have to charge up your bow. If you jump off a high platform, you land, If you jump off a high platform and you land, you have to wait a second before standing up again. Throughout the game, your purpose is to collect treasure. There are multiple types of this treasure. And then you also collect keys, which unlock the next room. And the rooms get harder and harder as you progress, with the enemies gaining more health and the obstacles becoming trickier to avoid, until eventually you reach Maid Marian and you live happily ever after. Now, let's talk about gender roles. So, one thing that is found in many traditional Robin Hood stories is that Robin Hood is treated as very masculine. almost hyper-masculine. This game does not take that approach at all. The first non-masculine feature you can see is that instead of having a determined, angry look like the masculine stereotype, he's very whimsical. He smiles, and when you're standing still, the Robin Hood character will turn his head and look around at the surroundings, walking around with curiosity instead of determined to save Maid Marian. The mechanics also reinforce this lack of masculinity. The game's mechanics make you feel extremely flimsy. If you get hit by even the tiniest blow, you'll be flung backwards and fall down ledges. If you get hit by an arrow, you'll lose almost a third of your health instantly. Additionally, the mechanics of the game encourage a very patient and slow and calculating gameplay, which contrasts to some games where you're encouraged to just rush forward angrily without thinking much about it. Because your bow takes a long time to charge up, you can't really outshoot the enemies. You have to strategically place yourself so that you can take out their health before they take out yours. Additionally, because your jump height only increases after multiple successive jumps, you have to line yourself up before jumping up platforms. Additionally, the enemies are portrayed as having much smaller heads and much larger muscles, which fits the stereotypical masculine ideal much better than the Robin Hood character, who has a large smiling face and a stick-like body. But because you are placed in Robin Hood, this game kind of counteracts traditional gender roles by painting Robin Hood's traits as positive, because Robin Hood is able to beat all of these enemies, even though their heads are so much smaller and their muscles are so much bigger. Overall, I would give this game a 7 out of 10 because it's difficult. But other than that, it's good.
In conclusion, all three of ours have different forms of gender roles that are being played, with mine being women being independent and strong, and men being portrayed with the typical manly traits.
Mine took a similar turn, with Marian having much more agency in her story, while Robin Hood had much less power, considering he got turned into a zombie.
Mine only focused on the one character of Robin Hood, but really defied the gender roles by making him weak and flimsy and weak.
We hope you enjoyed today's video.